So even though you are going for a position to be a Utah state senator, why does that matter to people across the country? And I mean, I feel like I know why it matters. I mean, you listen to people like Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota, and you go, man, I love hearing her speak, right, because of what she stands for. So what would be your comment on that, and why is it important? I mean, we want you on here because all this is very educational. We want to spread this message across the country.
No, that's a great question. And I think the answer lies in this is a seat in the United States Senate. There's only 100 senators. And whether you live in Utah or you live in Rhode Island, having a conservative voice, if you are conservative, matters. It really matters. I mean, take a look at what has happened with just the Supreme Court justices that have been nominated, right, under Trump. And we had conservatives that appointed them. Look how consequential that has been. It's the Senate that actually confirms these conservatives. And when you got a guy like Mitt Romney, that's one of 3 Republican defectors, I say, and he's voting to support the most radical Supreme Court justice in Ketanji Brown Jackson, that just in the last year that she's been on the court, has been on the wrong side of so many big issues. That's important. And so people understand that having a bold conservative, even outside of your own state, is going to help reduce the size, scope, burden of the federal government and ensure that we have conservative justices to the court. These are really, really big issues. And that's why our campaign has been so appealing. I got to tell you, just in the past 5 weeks since we've announced the candidacy, I've received donations online from over 43 states, I think now, at TrentStaggs.com.
Awesome.
It's been remarkable. We've been across all major media. I've been endorsed by some really great conservative pundits. And that has had a huge impact to get our message out there and to really show not just Utah, but the rest of the country that there is a strong conservative here in the state of Utah that if you help support, will be able to advance the type of limited government that you're looking for.
We are the United States, so that speaks to that. All the donations coming in from other states, I love to hear that.
Absolutely. Another thing that blows me away today in politics, it seems to me that 30, 40, 50 years ago, there were a lot of core values that whether you were, conservative or liberal or Democrat or Republican, that there was a lot of core values that politicians could agree on. And it seems like today that they're so far apart. And I feel like that's what's created so much division in our country today is there really aren't these core values. I don't know if you've seen the RFK and Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you watch that, I go, it's crazy to me that I listen to him talk, and a lot of the things he's saying are today's conservative values, but they're not really. They're American core values that whether you're Democrat or you're Republican or conservative or liberal, we should agree on these core values. How do you feel about that in politics today? I mean, would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I would agree with that statement that, sadly, we used to all be kind of America first, right? Individuals across party lines. One of the presidents, I love Ronald Reagan. I love Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. But there's a lot of what John F. Kennedy said back in 1960. If you take a look at his inaugural address, for example, I love reading through some of that and some of his other things. He was very hawkish, cut taxes. In his inaugural address, he appealed to our revolutionary. He said, we are the heirs to that first revolution. And that revolution was that the rights of man come not from the consent of come not from government, but from our creator, right? From the hand of God.
Oh.
And I don't hear Democrats saying that at all today, like referencing God, creator. We had such a providential view of history at our founding and recognize that, and we have to. That is, again, our revolutionary form of government, that we have inalienable rights to life, liberty, property. That's it. And people across party lines, yeah, used to agree on that, but anymore, sadly, we've become more and more divided. And I think that's by design. That's a tool of the left to really kind of divide and conquer.
What would you say to somebody, Trent, that may be thinking, the world's going to hell in a handbasket? What am I going to do about it? I'm a regular guy, regular gal out there that is living my life. Just maybe, politics 101. What do we do? What can we do? Do we just throw in the towel and say, heck, I'll just take care of my family? Do we keep fighting? What are your thoughts on that? I say we keep fighting. We got to choose the right side, right? And show that what we stand for. But what does somebody do?
We need to keep fighting. I mean, this is it. We have to be engaged. As we talked about earlier, if we're not, the only thing that is required for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing, right? That's what the saying goes. And so if we're not engaged, we're going to get the government we deserve. And sadly, we've had a lot of folks unengaged. We need to jump back in and jump in the fight. And that will ensure that our constitutional republic, which is the longest republic in history. I mean, you look at other countries and how often their governments have changed over through other written constitutions or become monarchies. We need to ensure that this constitutional republic remains and stays strong so our kids and successive generations have the same opportunities that we had. And we're not going to do that if we just put our hole in the head like an ostrich and say, I'm going to be removed. So what does that mean? It means understanding the Constitution. It means finding good people. If you're not wanting to run yourself, it's finding good people, solid people that are going to run for office and support them in any way that you can, whether that be financial or volunteering.
And you're talking in their individual cities, counties, not just at the federal level, right? I mean, we may not have a lot of control over the president of the United States, but you being a mayor and starting off where you started off, you all see this firsthand. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, across all layers of government. That's what we need. We need people that understand the Constitution, understand limited government. That was the system that was devised. It was supposed to be distributed. It isn't supposed to be centralized. And over the last century in particular, more and more power has been centralized in Washington, D.C. If you look at the top 10 richest counties in America, I think 6 or 7 of them are around Washington, D.C. It's disgusting. I mean, so at the local level, your city council member, mayor, school board, county, the states are supposed to be a check on that federal government. We need to have people that are elected to state government even that are going to stand up and really push back. That was the intent, is that the states would really put a check on the federal government. So it's important that we elect good people that understand the proper role of government across the board.
Something that blew my mind, I think it was in the Joe Rogan interview, actually, RFK talked about what it takes to run for president, the funding. I think it was $500 million to run for president, right? I mean, maybe we can talk about that for a second, just because, you're running to be a senator right now. And what does it take? I mean, what does it take to do that, to be able to be competitive? I mean, Mitt Romney's been around for a long time. He's got a lot of, power that way. What does it take? Maybe financially, but obviously we got to have the people behind you, but that takes money too.
It does. That's one of the most unfortunate things about the system. I believe it's a $10 million race. You look at Mike Lee, that got elected last year, between monies he raised and then what they call soft money or PACs, political action committees or those types of organizations that also pitch in. I think there was about $10 million on his side to about $8 million from this Evan McMullen that he ran against. So a state of our size, I think it's about a $10 million race. In Pennsylvania or other states where it's larger population, you could be 20, 30, 40. I mean, California could be $100 million, Senate race. It's ridiculous. But that's where I think we're at here in the state of Utah. And yeah, Mitt Romney's he's an establishment player. He's going to have money himself, and he has access to other donors that are part of the establishment or the swamp, if you will.
Crazy. Let me ask you this. Obviously yesterday was July 4th, and there's so many people that it seems like for one day of the year, they have so much pride in America. And I think a lot of people forget that day we're celebrating, all these fireworks was because we had a bunch of men who are willing to revolt against a government that were angry over taxes. You talked about cutting taxes. They were angry. They were willing to stand up, and they actually had to go fight. You talked about fighting. And I feel like in modern day America, I was actually surprised. You talked about the mask mandate when COVID hit. I was surprised how many people just willingly and blindly followed orders rather than using some critical thinking skills. So when it comes to those, I believe that, the Second Amendment is crucial for us, not only just keeping our freedoms, but actually defending them in the future as well from the government. And it always reminds me of that quote that says, hey, they asked another prime minister, you ever going to invade the United States? And he said, we can't invade the United States because there's a rifle behind every blade of grass. And I think that should be the perspective of every other country. But I also think that within our country, yesterday we went to a parade, and, in this day and age, you always worry about mass shootings and these kind of crazy things that happen. And in southern Utah, I feel pretty safe. I just assume that there's a large majority of good men and women that are carrying, and it makes me feel safe. And I know it makes my wife feel safe that we know our community, and we know that a lot of those people are carrying, and it makes us feel safer. How do you feel about the Second Amendment? How do you feel about concealed carry rights? What's your perspective on those things? Because I feel like that is a fundamental issue that is going to lead to everything else that we want in the future, is having rights to bear arms.
Yeah. Well, it's fundamental. As part of it's the Second Amendment for a reason. I think next to freedom of speech, the five things that are offered in the First Amendment: freedom of religion, speech, press, petition, government, assembly. Those things are absolute. We have to have those. And the founders knew this because they were great students of history, and they understood tyrannies and how government can really end up becoming tyrannical and forcing people into subjugation. So the Second Amendment is right there behind it, the right to bear arms, and as you said, I think in communities where you have high gun ownership, it's been proven statistically even that crime is down. People are conscripted right to that militia, and they are there, and it's a fundamental right. We have the right to for self-protection. I think it's a biblical principle, but it's also a principle that's part of our founding documents in the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, clearly. So that is something we absolutely need to stay vigilant on, because you're right. Any government in history that has become tyrannical, what do they do first? They go after people's ability to defend themselves, and we've seen a lot of that. I mean, the narrative has just been overwhelming from the media and the left in particular about needing to go after people's constitutional right to defend themselves and to carry and bear arms.